Hello and welcome back to the Nothing Notable podcast. This is the best of 2021 series. Right now we're talking about the best music of 2021. That's enough of an intro for me. Let's jump right into it. I listened to a lot of music this year.
And I didn't.
And you didn't. Jack, you listened to a little bit.
I feel like I listened to like slightly less than what the average person did.
So what that means is this is going to be a Daniel monologue episode, which is
You know what? That's what the people are really here for.
That's what the people want. They want to hear this voice. I really quick, just talking about last year, Jack, you and I shared a favorite album, which was Dua Lipa's Future Nostalgia. And
still haven't met her yet.
Still haven't met her yet since we moved to LA. What's up with that?
What's up with that? I just want to hang out.
Oh my God. See, here's the thing. Last year, 2020, I think I mentioned this on the pod, but music is the fastest form, other than like internet content, but like, you know, it's one of the fastest forms in terms of responding to a moment. Movies cannot respond to a moment fast because it takes so much money and so much time and so many people to get a movie made that by the time they make a movie about the Black Lives Matter 2020 protests, it's already years after the fact. And so they've missed that moment. They're able to sort of try and recapture it and then replay it. But again, it's like you're watching a rerun of a sporting event instead of the actual live game, you know? So with music last year, there was so much good music that I really connected to because I thought it was reflective of the moment. And because of that, it hit me in the feels in a really deep way. And so because of that, I had a lot of favorite albums last year. This year, I listened to a lot of music. I don't have a lot of favorite albums the same way I did last year. Like there's not a Dua Lipa album this year. The way I felt about Future Nostalgia last year, I don't quite have that this year, but I do have a lot of albums that I really did enjoy. So I guess I'll start off with what was, I think, my favorite album of the year. It was the album that surprised me the most when I first listened to it and has stayed with me every time I've listened to it since then. I re-listened to it today while I was driving home from work. It was Okay Human by Weezer.
Okay.
Okay, human.
God damn it,
Weezer.
So,
Early.
real quick, Weezer is not a band that I've really ever listened to. I never totally connected with Rivers Cuomo and his vocal styling. I've never loved the sound of Weezer. You know, songs that you'll know if you've heard the radio ever, Beverly Hills and Buddy Holly and some of their bigger stuff. I never totally connected with it. And so this album came out, and because I've become like a real music head, I just listen to stuff when it comes out. Like I just go into the new releases tab on Spotify and I just listen.
Hell yeah. I
look at the album cover. I'm like, yes or no. Yes. Then I listen to it.
That's an interesting way to go about it.
It really works. So as soon as I listened to it, I was struck by the fact that it didn't sound anything like Weezer. It is a very short album. It's only like 33 minutes or something like that.
I gotta say, I love that.
Yes. That is part of the reason why it stayed with me so much this year, is because of the brevity, because it is tight. Each song is tight and it doesn't overstay its welcome. The sound of the album, it's sort of Weezer mixed with like this orchestral sort of musical theater vibe. Lyrically, it feels very musical theatery. It's like each song has its own weird little concept. Grapes of Wrath, which is one of my favorite songs off of the album, is all literary references. You have a number of songs on here that are just lyrically very interesting. You know, the complaint that you might have is some of the lyrics are a little boomerish, like the song Screens, for example. It's like, oh, why are all the kids on screens now?
But why?
But why?
And what was the answer?
And what was the answer? That's a good question. But it's lyrically really interesting. It's music, the sonically, it has this sort of classical, a lot of violin, a lot of beautiful piano. I think my favorite song off of the thing is called Mirror Image. It's very tight. It's very short. I can't say enough good things about this album. If you have never listened to Weezer before and you're kind of adverse to the idea of doing it, I would say try this one, because it doesn't sound like Weezer. And they released 2 albums this year, and this is the one that makes it on my list because of how different it sounds. And again, it's just short, sweet, packs a punch. full of electricity. It is my favorite album of the year.
Now, just to touch on just a bigger picture thing.
Yeah.
You said they released 2 albums this year. I hate that. I don't like I don't like when artists are just like shoving music down my throat from them. Like, give me time to marinate with this shit first. You go out, you get some new, you cook up something new for me. Like, and let it come to you a little bit. Don't make an album just for the sake of making an album.
Here's a question though. What if like they just felt like both were very different and they already had all of them?
The point I was going to say too is that the fact that it's only 33 minutes long maybe makes this an exception to the rule. Yeah. But if you're coming out here with like a 20 track album every single year, then it's like I know there's going to be a lot of fillers in there,
right? Because
you can't make 20 good songs every single year.
And so to answer the question here, they were working on the second album that they released was called Van Weezer, and it is basically an ode to 80s hair metal, and that's just not kind of my thing anymore. And so that's why I don't love that album. But they were working on that for a long time, and then once the pandemic hit, then the inspiration for this album, Okay Human, came to be. There's a lot of themes on the album about isolation, being indoors. There are lines that are referencing to Zoom interviews and just not going outside and being on your screens all day and stuff like that. So this album was born out of, again, speaking to how music can reflect the moment, this album was born out of the feelings of 2020. And so they very quickly put that together, and you can feel that quick hit of inspiration. And that's also reflected by the amount of time that the album, the length of the album.
I'm okay with that. If something happened in the world or something happened in your life and you're going to draw inspiration from that to make your album for this year, that's fine then. But if you're just giving me like a generic album every year, I'm not a fan.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all good.
Okay, so someone else go, because I've been talking way too long and I have so many more albums.
Yeah, all my stuff is kind of related to other forms of media, but we're going to do it. And then I'm also going to say later, because I don't listen to music that much.
I'm ready for this.
So later I'm also going to say music that I've been listening to like a lot lately that is super old, but it's new to me in 2021. Okay, so our first one, we've actually talked about this already, so it's kind of cheap, but it is definitely the thing I've listened to the most this year. I think we all know it. We can all say it together. Bo Burnham's Inside.
Bo Burnham's Outside.
There we go. I think because, you watch it as a form of in a movie sense. And it's a hour and a half drama. Let's just say it's technically a comedy special, but it's not. We know this. But when you listen to it just as an album, it has a different feeling to it. And when I've been driving up, I think I drove up in June and July a lot, just because I had some family issues. Not issues, but just family stuff I had to go to. Okay.
Really?
Really? But when I went up, I went from 7 to basically like midnight, 2 a.m. Like I just drove after my shift. And it was really cool to just listen to it straight up, just from beginning to end. And again, that's, that is just like an album in a sense. It's not really there's not any of those intervals that are in the movie. And I found a whole new meaning to it and love for it, and appreciation for it. I think Goodbye is probably one of my best, or I think it's one of my best songs that I wrote. One of your best
pieces of work that you've ever made.
But it's one of my favorite songs, definitely, in the album. And I think we talked about this in our Inside review, but Bo puts it all out. And it's really nice. And I think as someone who's doing comedy down here too, it is a really nice just album to listen to. It kind of feels like it's just in your head, because a lot of things that Bo's saying, I'm thinking in my head, oh, this isn't gonna be good, I suck, all this shit. But yeah, it's really nice, and I gained a whole new appreciation for it, where it's just music and it's not anything else.
Yeah, Bo was my my number one artist this year on my Spotify Wrapped, because I listened to Inside the Songs, as it's called, so much on my drives to work and just driving around. And I really love again, we'll talk about this in the movie portion, so I'll keep this very brief. But like, I just love the.
Is it a movie?
I don't know. But we already passed TV. We're not doing stand-up comedy, so I don't know. We'll talk about it at some point.
We'll talk about it at some point.
Or maybe we already have talked about it at some point. These might be released out of order. I don't know.
Multiverse of madness.
Multiverse.
Nothing notable. Multiverse.
The only thing I'll say just about the music of Bo Burnham's Inside is that speaking of like musical theater with the Weezer album, like it feels like a musical, and Jack is uncontrolled right now.
Sorry that I like my life and like to laugh and have fun.
Sorry,
okay?
I'm thinking about if Ian was Doctor Strange.
No,
With Doctor Strange and Duncan, Idaho.
It feels like a musical, and I love that because I think it opens the door for Bo to do an actual musical one day, a Broadway musical. I love everything on that album. It's also the best vocal performance that Bo has given throughout the whole album. I mean, he sounds great. Let's jump to you, Jack, before I go, because I have a couple.
Jump to me? All right. Well, as has been well documented on last year's podcast and another podcast I was on someone else's show, I'm not really a big music person. I don't know what I'm talking about. So what I mean by that is I don't know what's necessarily good. I only know what I think to be good and what I enjoy.
Well, wouldn't that be good, in your opinion?
Maybe, but doesn't mean that it's actually good. It may just be what I enjoy.
And that's good for you.
It's good for me, right?
I'm saying your opinion matters, Jack.
Oh, thanks, buddy.
Yeah.
Well,
my God.
my God.
I want my mummy.
Oh, no.
So, this is all to say, I think Adele is maybe the greatest vocalist of our generation.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's where I was going with here. A lot of the music that I'll be presenting today is popular music. You don't got to go searching to find this stuff. But let me just say, Adele's album 30, this woman can sing, okay? It is an outstanding vocal performance. What I was talking about, letting your songs cook up for a while and giving a space between your albums, Adele does this here. I think it's been like 5 years since her last album, and I really appreciate that. And she's just incredible.
I also love this album. This is a great album. I have always been a fan of Adele, not always a huge fan of the totality of her musical work. I love the stuff that I hear on the radio, but I don't totally love the deep cuts. I don't always love the deep cuts. I really like this album because it feels... I mean, each of her albums are just titled after the age that she was when she released the album, which is beautiful. But this one feels like the best version of that. Like this feels like I'm getting a deeper glimpse into her life at this moment, which is interesting because she has taken so much time away from the public eye, and so we're getting to, like you said, we're getting to reinvestigate a person that was very famous and has been very famous for a long time, but took a little time away, and she was able to put together something that was really thoughtful, and that's all I could really ask for.
Right, and this is her divorce album. All the songs about this are about her divorce that she went through recently, and some of them like really hit deep. Like you can feel the emotion in these songs. There's one track on here where she uses a lot of voice memos, and let me just say, I'm a sucker for that shit.
Yeah, I love it.
I love albums that use voice memos. And I believe it's the second to last track on the album. I think there's like 12 tracks, which great length of an album. I think she said in an interview that she will never perform this one live because like it hurts her too much to sing it. Wow. And like the one like quote unquote live performance there is of it is her just like singing it at her house, and it's like posted on her Instagram or something, and she just murders it. Her vocals are incredible. It's a great album. I highly recommend.
Very good recommendation. I'm glad that you talked about it because it wasn't going to be on my list. It was going to be in honorable mentions. I'm glad we got to talk about it though.
Go Adele.
Go Adele.
Go Adele. That's what I said.
I didn't hear what you said. That's why I said
Go
what?
Adele. Okay, I'm going to go next. Maybe also my favorite album of the year. Harmony House by Dayglow. Have you heard of Dayglow?
No.
No.
So Dayglow is everything I mean, as far as I can tell, we gotta be careful when we talk about celebrities. You know, I don't know the guy, so maybe he's a horrible monster. But
yeah, you gotta be very careful because we've already been got once.
Yeah, but from what he presents, I think he represents so much of what I've been talking about in the last 2 years: sincerity and earnestness, and just like being a good, positive influence on the world. He has a YouTube channel which is pretty active. Like, he's a recording artist and has a YouTube channel as opposed to a YouTuber who becomes a recording artist. Yeah. So that is secondary to his music, but he has a YouTube channel and he breaks down how he made every song on this album. And he did the production for it in his bedroom. He played all the instruments, and at least I think he played all the instruments, if not all of it, most of it. And it sounds like sort of 80s synth pop, but it's not just like regurgitating 80s synth pop. It feels like a kid in their bedroom who loves 80s synth pop making 80s synth pop. And there's that charmingness to it, as opposed to where, like, we talk about Stranger Things and how it feels like it's sort of trying to just rip off Steven Spielberg, you know?
Yeah.
This doesn't feel like it's ripping off 80s synth pop. It feels like it loves 80s synth pop, and it's a celebration of that sort of sound. And the beats are very simplistic. The instrumentals are very simple. Part of that's because he did most of the production himself. If he was teamed up with like A+ level producer, I have no idea how that might sound, but this is coming from his soul, coming from his heart, and it has so many lovely, warm, synthy. I'm starting to sound like Anthony Fantano now, just going on with adjectives, but lovely, warm, synthy sound that just radiates positivity through the radio. And some of my favorite songs, the opening track, Something, was one of my most played songs this year. He said he took great inspiration from Talking Heads, another band I love. Then Medicine, of course, which is amazing, and Close to You, and Moving Out. The last thing I'll say about this album is I care deeply about thematic consistency throughout an album. I want one of two things when I'm listening to music. I either want an album to have a through line taking me from A to Z with a story, or I want it to be bangers. It doesn't have to have thematic consistency if it's just bangers.
Only bangers.
Only bangers. So, but in this case, there is this repeated musical like motif, I guess. This do 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 do, and that comes back through 3 songs throughout the album. And when it comes back, it ties things together and unifies the entire album and makes it feel like one piece instead of just a collection of songs. Again, I would highly recommend you listen to this album, but also go watch the videos of how he made the album, because he has this incredible smile. Just such a nice person, it seems to me. And I love this album, and it's grown on me over time. And I think, again, it's a pretty short album, so it won't take up too much of your time.
Cool.
Tyler, you go ahead.
All right. Next album I'm going to talk about is a weird one. It is by the Sparks Brothers. It's Annette.
There it is.
Yeah, Annette, the musical that starred Marion Cotillard and Adam Driver. That is on Amazon for free, and no one watched it. It's crazy. The opening song in particular, So May We Start, is so good. I don't think anything tops it in the movie, actually. I think it's funny because the opening is just if anything, is just like the opening orchestra thing. What's that called? It's the
overture.
The overture. It's basically like an overture with like lyrics. Basically, like they're starting the show. Like, that's how it is, and it's really catchy. It's really nice, and the whole thing is kind of just weird, and like not really like it's kind of reinventing a musical. Adam Driver like plays a stand-up comedian in it, and it's like really weird, but not talking about the movie too much, but the music is just very like intense. It's like operatic at times. It's a very strange one. We've talked a lot about in the TV one, at least. We talked a lot about like things going back to like a certain time, and this definitely feels like a throwback to an operatic time, even though like it's set in contemporary like Los Angeles. Very interesting film, very interesting music though. The Sparks are like just so. I've been listening to a lot of their music lately, and it's just like interesting stuff that like you don't really think about. And I feel like Annette does that pretty perfectly.
I think I haven't seen Annette yet, so I can't talk about the movie or the music, but it seems to be a very polarizing thing, not just the movie, but also the music. And I think that's awesome because it means that, you know, a band with a perspective and a point of view put out an album of music, you know, and it might not be for everyone, you know. Jack, you go ahead.
Me go ahead?
You go ahead.
All right. I got another album here. Funny enough, another divorce album.
Love it.
This
Donda.
one is from... What'd you say?
Donda.
Donda. No, Donda did not make the list. This is Casey Musgrave's Star-Crossed. Another interesting album. I don't have like a ton of analysis on it, but I just enjoyed listening to it. I think there's some really neat songs on here. There's a song called Camera Roll that I think is just like conceptually and like what the lyrically is just like a real nice song, and I just enjoyed the album.
I love it. I also don't have that much to say on it, but it's an album that I think is definitely worth a listen. To condense and to save time, I'm going to combine 3 albums here because they all sort of are of a piece.
Donda, Certified
Donda.
Lover Boy.
Yeah, no, neither are making my
Donda
list.
the Deluxe Edition.
Okay, it's Planet Her by Doja Cat, Call Me If You Get Lost by Tyler, the Creator, and The Off Season by J. Cole. Of a piece because they're of a hip hop lineage or a R&B lineage. I'll go through each of them real quick. All 3 of these are fantastic albums through and through that don't have many or maybe any misses on them. Planet Her by Doja Cat is so involving from the very beginning. This is a dance album. You want to groove, you want to move, and it has a very specific sound that, again, sort of the way that Dayglow loves synth pop. You can feel Doja Cat's love for the type of music that this is, and I can't properly articulate what kind of music it is, but it is very much of an older R&B sort of pop dance crossover sort of a thing.
I couldn't name you one Doja Cat song, but I've heard them before, and I know what you're saying. Every Doja Cat song I hear, I'm like, oh, I could get jiggy with this. Like you could have, they're all fun.
That's exactly right. It's a fun album, and you hear songs on the radio like Kiss Me More with SZA, who, by the way, SZA, the greatest voice in the world. And I feel like because SZA has not released an album, you know, she does different music than Doja Cat, but they both sort of occupy that same sort of lane culturally in terms of like best R&B singer. And so since SZA has not dropped an album in quite some time, Doja Cat sort of takes her place here, which is really fun. But I love this album. I love, like I said, Kiss Me More, Woman, Get Into It. Get Into It has been playing on that Taco Bell commercial a lot. And so every time it plays, like I want to re-listen to the album.
You want to go eat Taco Bell?
I want to go eat Taco Bell, and I want to listen to the album. Call Me
At the same time.
Call Me If You Get Lost by Tyler, the Creator. This was really fun. I'm a big Tyler, the Creator fan. His last album was his best album, and he took home the Grammy for Best Rap Album. And this year he's talked about how he wanted to make a rap album, and there still is a lot of that classic R&B influence in this, and the rhythms and the textures of the sound are just so unique because he produces his music, and so it comes from his brain. There are sounds that you just don't hear anywhere else. So while that is still consistent, this is a rap album, and he wanted to just like go for it. He wanted bars. That's like what he's talked about. He just wanted to rap, and that is very clear because he has DJ Drama basically doing like hype ups throughout the album, and that maintains a consistent element throughout that sort of, again, unifies. And I listened to Corso so many times this year. I listened to Lumberjack so many times this year. This album is really fun. Again, a short album. It feels like a victory lap after a Grammy win, where
That's cool.
Where you win a Grammy and then you're like, I'm just going to do something sick for me. And whether you like it or not, that's cool. I love this album. Shout out to Tyler, the Creator. I think he's on a whole different level of creator. And then finally, Off Season by J. Cole. There's a weird like hive of people that don't like J. Cole. Anthony Fantana was like the head of them. Doesn't make any sense to me. J. Cole is firmly up there with the best rappers in I'm not going to say in the game, because I hate saying that.
That's not who you are.
That's not who I am.
You don't want to be that guy.
I don't want to be that guy. But these are some of the best lyrics that J. Cole has ever had. It's a beautifully put together album in terms of the core musical elements, but the thing that really sets it off for me is the lyrics. I think he's on another level, and in many ways, the title of the album, The Off Season, it's funny because it is the off season because Kendrick Lamar has not released an album in quite a while. But even though it's the off season, this is a great album, and I would be very happy to see it win the Grammy this year. So those are some like rap R&B sort of albums that I really love this year. One of you two can take it from here.
I'm behind now. We're doing my behind ones. So I listened to Thundercat this year.
Yeah, Thundercat's awesome.
Thundercat's great. I really like Drunk, like his little album thing that he made. But it's really good. I like his songs. He's a fun person. It seems. I just heard about him this year. And don't worry, it's going to get funnier as we keep returning to my catching up on music.
I heard of this guy called Michael Jackson.
Yeah. Don't spoil the joke.
Don't spoil it.
But yeah, Thundercat's awesome, but he didn't release an album this year. It's just like, this is the first year I've heard of him.
Thundercat's awesome, and he's a huge part of many different artists' discography, because he'll just show up and do a lot of work on a Kendrick Lamar album, where he'll do a lot of work. He works with he worked with Michael McDonald, and just like the widest of nets. He's so many artists end up gravitating around his sphere or his orbit, and total shout out to Thundercat. Love it. Jack, what do you got?
Another album I really enjoyed was Lord's Solar Power.
Yes.
I think Lord's hella cool, and this album like just had such a unique like sound to it that you don't hear in a lot of like pop music these days. It was very like kind of like hippie 60s, all kind of like airy like. Again, another example of letting an album cook up for a while. I think she hadn't released one since like 2018, 2017, something like that. I enjoyed it a lot. Thought it was neat.
I also love this album. This was, again, going to be an honorable mention for me. I think thematically it's really interesting because she sort of got her big break with Royals, which is about like, we're never going to be doing that thing. And that thing is sort of the core element of this album in a way. It feels like she's now a superstar musician living in California, and those are the experiences that she's having, but without being in an inauthentic way. It's just sort of like, this is where my life is now. It reminded me a lot of Counting Crows' second album. They'll come up later, by the way. A lot of people,
that's what we call a tease.
That's what we call a tease. A lot of people were critical of that album because it felt very much like what I'm saying, like they moved to LA and they became superstars, and so their experience is now about what it is to be a star in California, specifically Los Angeles. And so that kind of is how this album feels. And instead of being critical of that, I think we should, examine it. And if it's being that for pop glory, then that's one thing. But this, again, like you said, it has sort of this like 60s-ish airiness, and I have nothing more to say. It's a good album. It's a good album. And
I thoroughly enjoyed it.
And she has a very good voice.
Right, and like a unique voice too.
Yeah. I'm going to take this in a whole different direction.
Okay.
You ready for this?
Yeah.
Okay, I've got two albums I'm going to combine again.
Cool.
Because they are, again, of a piece. I got... In 2020, I accepted the fact that I really love pop, because before that, I was a guy who was like, pop, it's bubblegum.
Isn't that weird?
Yes, it is.
To be like, I'm not going to like this thing that lots of people like because lots of people like it.
Exactly. Yeah. So I accepted pop, and that's, if you go back and listen to the best of 2020. That's why I have
exclusively pop albums on my list this year.
And pop is awesome. This year, I really fell in love with English post-punk.
We were talking about this yesterday.
All right, here we go.
Here we go. This is a turn.
This is a turn. We have 2 albums here. Okay, we have Drunk Tank Pink by Shame, and we have Crawler by Idols. These are 2 albums that I think this is how I'll intro this. If you're new to this genre, I would listen to Drunk Tank Pink first because it is a bit more fun, silly, lively, but while maintaining that classic English screaming punk vibe. Whereas Crawler by Idols is a bit more, I don't want to say like thinking man's post-punk, but like it is more heady than Drunk Tank Pink. It has like a little bit more to say, I think, than Drunk Tank Pink. But both of these albums are so good. Drunk Tank Pink, Alphabet, Nigel Hitter, Born in Luton, Snow Day. Literally the first like 5 songs on this album are just straight bangers. It's a very unique sound. If you're not used to it, it will be abrasive. Give it a couple listens though, because that's what it took for me to get into it. I had to listen to it a few times because when you first start listening to punk or post-punk, it just sounds like noise. You don't fully understand it, but you think about it. It becomes an earworm that gets stuck in your head. And then you listen to it again and then again and then again. And before I knew it, I loved this album, which is an interesting place to be. And then by the time Crawler came out, which came out late this year, I was already indoctrinated. And so then I was fully in. And then Crawler is such a special album. It starts off so patient and thoughtful, and it really takes its time. And then it leaves you on a note of like, are you ready for the storm? And then the storm hits, and then it's off to the races from there. Car Crash is such an intense, dark song. I'm sure that that's one that listeners may have heard already because that's the most popular song off the album, but definitely give these 2 a try, even if this is not your genre, because it's something else. Once you take a hit, you can't stop.
Dang.
Sounds like an endorsement to me.
Quite an endorsement.
To eat chips.
I like Connor Roy. Tyler, you go ahead.
Okay, this soundtrack's really cool. It's the original soundtrack to The French Dispatch.
Oh.
It is the first soundtrack that like I've like listened to fully, just like in the sitting before, and it really makes you feel like you're in a Wes Anderson movie. I'm not sure if he does this with all his movies, because I'm more focused on like the movie aspect, usually not the soundtrack. But I think this is unique. I want to say. And yeah, we'll talk about The French Dispatch in the movie section, but I think like what the soundtrack does really well is just, again, like I said earlier, just makes you feel like you're a Wes Anderson character. Like when my car broke, my car's still broken, but I'm using Dylan's car. But basically when I was biking over here, I was just listening to the soundtrack and I was like, damn, I'm just like a Wes Anderson character, like going around LA right now. And it's just really fun to listen to. It's like weird and quirky, and we'll talk about this with the movie too, but like it reminds you like why Wes Anderson is so special, and to have just like a music soundtrack that like really encapsulates him perfectly is just something really special. So I like that this year.
I like that too. I've always liked the music of Wes Anderson movies. Mm-hmm. He uses a lot of other people's music, but also the core scores. I am totally blanking on the composer that he works with a lot, but he works with this one composer a lot who has just really interesting sounds. Yeah. And I totally, I'm here for that. And to your point about listening to a soundtrack fully, I've also only listened to like 1 or 2 soundtracks fully. That's when you know like it's just a different level, is when you're listening to, or you're watching like M. Night Shyamalan's The Village or something, and you're like, this music is really good. I have to listen to the soundtrack. So
there's levels to this shit.
There's levels to this. So that's a good rec.
Next up for me, I think Halsey just as a person is like super cool.
Sure, yeah.
Like she has a whole separate Twitter account just to talk about basketball, because like her fans on her main account like aren't there for that shit. And her album was like pretty good, I thought. There's a couple of songs on there like about her like newborn child and motherhood that I thought were just like really sweet. And I love when any sort of art like comes from like a personal place of inspiration. Not a whole lot to say on it, but I enjoyed it. It's pretty decent.
I also like Halsey. I think that Halsey, I'm going to make this podcast 40 billion years long, but there are certain women in media that really just take the brunt force of like misogyny. This is of course consistent for all women in media, but like some of them just like really take a hard hit on social media, and Halsey is one of them. Mm-hmm. Particularly like sex positive musicians or artists. And so, yeah, shout out to Halsey.
Just seems like a cool person.
Yeah. And I'm going to go with one of my favorite artists of this year, an artist that I listen to so much, and someone who released a stellar album, Remy Wolf. She released an album called Juno. She is a singer, songwriter, multi-instrumentalist. I just keep going Fantano right now. She has a sound to her that cannot totally be described. It's very interesting. She had a song last year called Photo ID, which is just like a banger. This album feels like a lot of those as well. Starting off with Liquor Store, which is just so much fun. Check out this album if you like fun bopping songs to drive around to. Oh, yeah. If you're going out with friends for the night, throw this album on and you're bound to have a good time. It's an album that makes you want to move. It's an album that is so much fun.
I already did move. I moved 3 weeks ago. I don't want to move again.
I don't want to listen to this shit.
Juno.
Fucking sick of moving.
Juno by Remy Wolf. Check out Remy Wolf. I highly recommend. I didn't say as much about her because, as we get closer to the end, I want to sort of be a little bit more brief. I'm going to mention one more before I throw it back to you, Tyler. Just because I don't have a ton to say on it, but just you wait. I don't have a ton to say on it, but it is one of the better albums of the year. It's An Evening with Silk Sonic by Silk Sonic.
I did listen to that one. I don't have a ton to say on it. It was funky. It was pretty neat. I don't have analysis for it, but
funky, creamy, delicious album. It's so fun, so sexy. I think one thing this will be my big point about the album, because I love both of these artists, and they fuse really well together. They complement each other so well. The one thing I'll say is that Bruno Mars is unapologetically sexy, not just like as like a person who is attractive, but like in the way that he sings, the way that the content of the songs. It's so much, it's braggadocious. It's like, I am the shit and I know it and I'm hot and like let's just hang out. And like that is a vibe that is enjoyable to listen to, because like it becomes infectious. You feel yourself when you're listening to Bruno Mars, and you feel yourself when you're listening to Silk Sonic. So if you like funky, this is it.
I think if I would have listened to it more, because I think I've only listened to it once, maybe twice at this point, I would have had it on my list here. I just haven't listened to it enough.
It's also short, so it's a good one.
It's short. I love it.
Tyler, go ahead.
Sweet. Dude, MF Doom is so good.
Hell yeah, man. I was not expecting that.
He's really good. I started listening to him more this year. I've heard some songs by MF Doom before this year, but like, he like died last year and no one knew about it until New Year's, which was just crazy. But yeah, he's really good. I think Doomsday is so good. And there's like I've just been listening to a lot of his music lately, and it's cool. And like, again, not 2021, but someone I have been listening to lately. Shout out to MF Doom.
Shout out to Christina Applegate, man. MF Doom's awesome. That's like a real I think MF Doom has become more popular over the last few years, and totally. Especially after the death. But that's like a real hip hop head sort of a thing. If you listen to MF Doom, again, I feel cringy for saying that because like that's not necessarily real hip hop head, but like that's introduction to hip hop head music, you know. That's the in the starter pack of like getting into some more.
Up.
Yeah, exactly. MF Doom, shout out.
Yeah, Jack.
My last one here for today. Didn't release an album, but my guy Darren, he's been an artist for like 10 years now, 7 years. Started off wanting to be a rapper and just like wasn't really like fitting into it, like just wasn't it for him, and like transitioned in the last like 3 or 4 years to maybe more pop like stuff. He only released one song this year. It's called Blue Till You, but like just like the last 2 years, like he's released 4 or 5 songs, and I think they're all real fun. He's just a cool dude. I'll talk about him if we get to our alternative media section later too. But just
shout out
to Darren.
Okay, just to take the temperature real quick. Here's what I've got. Let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
I got 4 more jokes.
8.
I can do this all day.
I've mentioned hyperpop once before.
I totally know what that means.
Hyperpop, for those of you who have not listened, I will explain.
Thank you.
Hyperpop.
I got the balls to say I don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Hyperpop is it takes some of the things that we as human beings, as we've listened to pop, some of the things that we become critical of pop for, the synthetic nature of the vocals, the simplification of lyrics and structure and stuff like that. It takes that and heightens that. And so it intentionally distorts and synthesizes, and sonically it's crunchy. It's hard to listen to. It's a little bit abrasive to the ears, and it's just calling attention to itself is really like the tenet of hyperpop as far as I could say. I'm not a music expert, but that's how I would describe it, I think. And there was a band called Cake Pop that put out an album called Cake Pop 2. Hyperpop is abrasive, like I said, but it's really fun. Cake Pop 2 is awesome, and the vocals are heavily distorted. It sounds like if you were on helium basically throughout the entire album. Crunchy sounds. There's only so many adjectives I can use to describe hyperpop. Crunchy. But this is an awesome album, and I think that hyperpop is just as a genre quite subversive. And if you are tired of pop, give this a try, because it's like a little club to be a part of where you're like, oh, I don't like pop. And they're like, we don't either. But here is pop amplified. Cake Pop 2, good album. Highly recommend.
I literally said at the top of this podcast, I'm not a music guy. I don't know what I'm talking about.
Hey, but here we are. We're doing great.
We're here. We're doing really well. I think this is way better than our music pod last year.
I think there's vast improvement, but we'll let the fans be the judge of that.
I'm going to do honorable mentions now so that I don't end the pod lame. I'm going to end the pod with what I think is one of the most impressive albums. But so first I'm going to go a couple honorable mentions.
Yeah.
Lost in America by Low Village, Lyrics to Go by Coda the Friend. These are 2 albums that are just good hangs, good vibes, calm, peaceful, thoughtful songs or albums that are nice to just chill to. They're very chill albums. I want to shout out Sleigh Bells by Texas. This is again sort of it's sort of like a post-punk, post-rock sort of album. That's an album that I really liked. I like the Intourable album by Men I Trust. A couple of really great songs on there. That's an awesome album. Of course, I have to shout out maybe my favorite band of all time, the Mountain Goats. John Darnielle again.
I do remember you mentioned them last year.
They have been on a tear the last few years. They've just been ripping off album after album, and this is another stellar album. It's called Dark in Here. Lyrically, I don't think, we look back on some of the great lyricists or at least in American history. One of the minds that comes to me is Paul Simon. You think of Bob Dylan. I put John Darnielle in that Lin-Manuel Miranda. I put John in that same category. He is so he's prolific the way he puts out so much of this, and the lyrics are so smart and so complicated, and it's impossible to me how he's able to do this. One thing I really like, this is my only insightful comment on this album and his music generally, is that I really like command-based lyrics where either the singer or the character that the singer is playing is talking directly to you, telling you something to do. He plays that in his album Goths, the Mountain Goats album Goths, where the whole conceit of the album is about being goth or about, struggling in high school. He does that a lot in Songs for Pierre Chauvin, and he does that a lot in this album where it's like focus up, move forward, do this. It's sort of like an internal rally cry. Just like very interesting lyrically and sonically. This album feels very full. There's a big band in this one. And that's not always the case because Mountain Goats is John Darnielle and whatever pieces he puts around him. In this one, he puts
Frank Darnielle.
Exactly. In this one, he puts a lot of pieces in the band. So shout out. Those are some of my honorable mentions. And then I have a few more to go after this. Tyler, please take it away.
Okay, cool. So this was like an adaptation of a Broadway show that came out this year. Recently viewed it. It's an original musical. No, I'm not talking about In the Heights. That was a joke. I know it's a worse version of the Broadway show, but we're not being negative here, okay?
No, ma'am.
No, In the Heights. I'm just kind of riffing on In the Heights right now. Do you guys remember those? Sorry, this is like off topic. Do you guys remember those books we read? We went to different elementary schools, but there were like books in elementary school that a lot of elementary school kids read. It was like Sideways School or some shit. It was like the building was like sideways, and it's called like Sideways School or something like that.
How can a building be sideways?
No, I know. It was like the building was like made weird. And I don't know if this is a fever dream or just something I learned in third grade.
This is the Mandela effect.
Yeah, it could be the Mandela effect though in full force.
Do I remember that? No, I don't.
It's been driving me crazy lately.
Is that one of your favorite albums of the year?
It's one of my favorite albums of the year. Basically, I'm just making a buffer for Daniel.
Well, one of my favorite albums of the year was The Mandela Effect.
Thank you, Tyler, for riffing so that we could break me up a little bit.
Yeah, of course. And I have one more joke. So
okay, beautiful. Okay, I have.
That's my time.
3 final albums, and I'll go quick on 2 of them.
Do 2, and then Tyler will do his joke. So then you can do your last one.
I've got first, again, one of my favorite bands, Counting Crows, released a very short album this year, Butter Miracle Suite 1. This is a fun album. I've been waiting for Counting Crows music for some time, and I didn't know if it was ever going to happen again. And they just dropped this on our heads. It's one of the fun things about it was Adam Duritz was just kind of doing like this major press tour, and he's in a really good like stage of his life. He's
really happy in his headspace right now.
He's really happy in his headspace right now. And so getting to see that and getting to hear a little bit more about the band and the history of the band and stuff was really good. Something I love about bands like Cake, bands like Counting Crows, or Dave Matthews Band, bands that were big in the 1990s is some of them, like Coldplay in the early 2000s, they sounded like that, and now they sound like something totally different. They sound like pop. Counting Crows, while they evolve, they don't change their core sound. They still sound like a band from the 1990s, and that's what this album reminded me of. It felt like a 90s alt-rock song or alt-rock album. So shout out to them. And another, I guess, rock album is... of course, a band that I don't have a huge history with, but is a band that I've always enjoyed the sound of, and that's Kings of Leon. They put out an album this year called When You See Yourself. You'll know Sex on Fire, and you'll know oh my God, what is that one other song that's so huge?
The one other Kings of Leon song?
Oh my God, I've been roaming around.
Oh man.
And down and all I see. Use somebody.
There we
go.
Okay, so those songs. This album is I keep using words like thoughtful or patient, but again, that's how I would describe this album. It's a good hang. It's very patient, and it takes its time. There's a bunch of great songs on this album. The reason I'm including it is not just because I like songs on the album, but because I think all of the songs on the album are good. Often an album will have like 3 good songs and then a lot of filler or some absolute duds. This album is just good, and then good, and good. Fairly short. I think it's about 45 minutes, so it won't take up too much of your time. It's a really good album. I like The Bandit, Golden Restless Age, and Echoing the most off of that album. So high recommend to that album. And I just love unique voices. And I think that the lead singer of Kings of Leon has a very unique voice, a very recognizable voice. So those are 2 of my final 3. Tyler,
Sweet.
You go ahead.
My final album, it's by Louis Sakar, actually, and it's called Wayside School is Falling Down. So it's a 1989 children's dark comedies short story cycle novel by Sakar. And basically it's like, it's in a series called Wayside School series. So that was the book I was thinking about in the last bit. So the first one's called Sideways Stories from Wayside School. Second one is Wayside School is Falling Down. Third one is Wayside School Gets a Little Stranger. And then, a new one came out last year. So it's 1978, 1989, 1995, and 2020. Wayside School, Beneath the Cloud of Doom.
Wow. That sounds ominous and like it could be related to COVID.
And it also seems like it could be related to,
the Mandela effect.
Yeah. So that's my favorite album.
I'll tell you what, I actually do remember that now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now that I know the title, I do remember that. Those were totally an elementary school book.
Damn,
right,
your last one.
Big movie head, big music head.
Yeah,
here.
big head.
Okay, this is an album that you will see on a lot of year-end lists. I think that this is one of the most interesting. I thought it was interesting. This is one of the most...
There's too much fucking shit in this movie.
Too much fucking shit in this podcast.
This is one of the most interesting albums for a number of reasons I'll talk about now. It is called Ignorance by the Weather Station. This sounds like, to me, the evolution of a band like Fleetwood Mac. The vocal tone of the lead singer of the Weather Station is sort of hush. It's very quiet and soft, and there is a soft power that emanates from the singer of this band. This album starts off really strong with The Robber. It moves into my favorite song, which is the second song on the album, and then from there it just carries. Pretty complex, and I'm still sort of diving into it and understanding it. And
would you say like those are the best kind of like forms of just media in general? It's like something you can just sit with for a while. It like doesn't tell you everything right away.
Yes, it's an album that I've had to listen to several times. I liked it a lot the first time I listened to it, but like to really understand it, you have to listen to it a few times. And those are definitely the best kind of albums because they stay with you. And the complexity of this album, it doesn't shove you away, it doesn't push you away, it doesn't make you want to not listen to it. It does the exact opposite. It makes you want to listen to it again. So Ignorance by the Weather Station, this is easily one of the best albums of the year, one of the most interesting and complex, and just feels like something that we've been missing. I think that's my big point about the Fleetwood Mac comparison is like, I haven't heard this in quite some time, and I'm very excited to hear what they do next. Those are all of our albums and short stories.
Favorite children's books.
And so thank you very much for listening. This has been the Best of 2021's music edition. Listen to our TV pod as well as our movies pod and our alt media pod. All of them will be sort of in a playlist for you to listen at your own leisure in whatever order you like. Thank you so much for listening. I've been Daniel.
I've been Tyler.
And I've been Jack.
And let us know what some of your favorite albums were as well. Thank you for listening. I already said that.